Good morning and welcome once again. We are officially recording and that privacy statement is now in your chat box. Welcome back. It's the beginning of September. This is kind of kicking off your monthly webinars from here on out for the next, what do we got left? About 11 months together, right? We're just getting started. Really. If you haven't signed in yet, if you do have access to the platform, go ahead and sign in. That does help us with tracking program name, however you want to identify yourself. And if you want to participate, we always do a little bit of an icebreaker question. Do you have a best self-care tip? If you want to share with your peers and us, we'd appreciate that. As folks are signing in, just a reminder as to where we've been and where we're going. Last month was a pretty full month, the first month that kicked off our planning grant cohort. We introduced AmeriCorps through both a program and fiscal orientation. We started locating and reviewing AmeriCorps guidance, and you'll continue to read that and get intimate with all of that as the year goes on. And then at the end of August, we had our first topic-based webinar, Theory of Change, and evidence to support your theory of change. And the theory of change, at least in our mind, in our definition, is really the guiding principle for your overall program design. And this is something that's really a living theory, something that's constantly being approved on, tweaked a little bit, however you want to put that. And today we're going to continue building on that theory of change framework with adding the components of the logic model, performance measures, and then of course making sure we know how to collect data for those performance measures. So theory of change is a really, really big concept, and the logic model and the measures are just one piece of that overall puzzle. Thanks for folks that are signing in. Hiking. I'm going to be doing a little bit of hiking and being outside this weekend. Looking forward to it. Hope everyone has a nice holiday weekend. Thanks to those that are signing in and participating in our chat question. Next month, we are going to introduce the operational request for grant opportunity and a little bit about partners and budgeting and maybe some fund development. How do you raise funds? What do you need to do in order to fully fund these programs? But really what that is, it's a little bit of a pause. Not everyone will be applying this fall or even next spring. Some of you may finish the entire year before you actually apply. All depends on your organization and your preferences, and we'll continue to talk about that in your one-on-ones. Looking at this cohort, I do believe one of you, Valley View, may choose this fall to engage with us in a special opportunity called Public Health AmeriCorps. So that webinar next month and everything that we do in the next couple months may be important to you all. But the other two grants, Girl Scouts and Salvation Army, most likely will be talking to you about applying in the spring. So the next webinar is a nice introduction. It's all about planting seeds. And for those of you that aren't going to be applying this fall, it's also just gives us a little space in the curriculum to help you continue on that larger piece and that larger homework of that theory of change framework. So most of September and most of October is really all about brainstorming that theory of change and starting to get some ideas on paper. If you look at your curriculum document, that PDF, we kind of use it as our quarterly guide. Last time we started talking about alignment between need, intervention, and intended outcomes. And how do we support our intervention? How are we guessing? What is our theory? What is it based on? We're going to keep moving on that same pathway. Like I said, we're bringing back Lou Thompson. Thank you much, Lou, who will be joining us here in a second. And we're going to think about things today like annual measures. Your logic model might help you drill down on how many members you might be looking for, what activities they might be doing, how many staff may need to be part of your program. And then we'll even get into some nitty-gritty stuff around data collection and how to ensure fidelity in data collection, that all important proof, whether anecdotal or not, to relay and to know if your program is making those process changes that you'd like to see. So with that, welcome back, Lou. I will turn it over to you to get us started. And I'm going to be advancing slides, folks, for Lou and bringing up some pieces for us to work on as a group. So do hang with us. Make sure to stay in that chat box and over the audio lines, because we're going to do some interactive things today, right, Lou?
Yes, that's right. So thanks so much, Robin, for driving the slides. And hello, everyone. Good morning. We have 3 parts to this webinar today. We're covering logic models and also performance measures with a little bit about data collection for those measures. There are resources where you can access the full slides. Similar to last time, I have taken the AmeriCorps materials that they have online and just done a few edits to compile the deck for today. So there are some minor changes, but all of the full slideshow webinar is posted online for logic models. It's in a different place. It's under the evaluation resources, and then for the high quality performance measurement and more curriculum about collecting data, that's on the National Performance Measurement Core Curriculum page. So those are linked if you want to access the full trainings. All right, so we can talk about our first topic, which is how to develop a program logic model. We hope that this presentation gives a basic understanding on how to develop a logic model. Maybe this is something you've done before, maybe this is totally new, but we'll be going through it with a focus on your AmeriCorps, your potential AmeriCorps program. And hopefully you will learn how this is a valuable tool for your program operations, and a tool that you can use when developing your performance measures and later on with future program evaluation activities. So by the end, we're hoping that you'll be able to describe what a logic model is, how it can be useful, understand what those key components are, and be ready to develop a logic model for your own program. And we won't be getting so much into evaluation planning. I think we have saved that piece more to like webinar 10. We'll revisit this topic and chat a little bit more about evaluation, since that's not something that you will have to worry about for quite some time. All right. Because of our topic just a couple weeks ago, you should have a pretty solid understanding of theory of change and what that's all about. So today we're covering logic model. We're going to talk a little bit about how it relates to your program's theory of change. So the logic model is a visual representation of that theory of change. I know that the PowerPoint last time and even the worksheet that you got kind of breaks up the theory of change into very distinct sections or boxes. There's different columns in the worksheet, but in the grant application, the theory of change is actually just a running narrative in the application. It's not kind of broken up into a chart, while the logic model is more in the form of a chart with these separate columns for the different pieces. And your logic model is going to communicate how your program works by depicting the intended relationship among the resources that you have available to operate your program, the activities you've chosen for your program to carry out, and then the changes or results that the program hopes to achieve, which are referred to as outputs and outcomes. And so we'll talk about each of these components in the presentation today. Logic models really can come in different sizes and shapes and vary in level of detail, ranging from really simple to complex, depending on your program design and the different activities. Some of your programs, maybe your members are doing one specific thing, or maybe in other programs you have different member positions with different position descriptions, and you have just a lot of different activities that you're focused on. So everyone's logic model is going to look a little different as far as length and complexity, but there will still be some key components that are the same no matter what. So let's talk about those key components. There will be a column where you summarize your community problem and need. For whatever reason, in this AmeriCorps slide deck, they don't mention that community problem need column, but you will see that that is there, and which you'll just summarize from your theory of change. So it's not a new piece, but you're just kind of reiterating what you covered in your theory of change. And so continuing from the left side, you would then have your program's inputs, sometimes called resources. And those are the things that are really essential for your program activities to occur. It can be things like human power, financial resources, organizational, community-based resources, anything that you need to carry out your program's activities. And there are some examples on the slide, like funding, program staff, maybe you have a specific curriculum you're using, so you would put that under the inputs column. Next, we have the activities component, which is the specific action or actions that make up your program or intervention. So these are the processes, tools, events, other actions that are used to bring about your program's desired outputs and changes. So some of the examples here are maybe you're doing workshops, you're doing food preparation counseling, you're providing referrals to food programs and resources. So things like that. Next, we go to outputs. And I hope you all are thinking about your program right now, or the program you're hoping to propose, and thinking about, what might this look like for my program? So the outputs are what your specific activities will create or produce. Like we say, it's kind of the bean counting. And so it's described numerically, it's quantified in some way. So that could be things like the specific number of individuals who attended a workshop, or maybe even the number of workshops that you provided, the number of individuals receiving services, those types of things. So it's the direct result of the activities that you engaged in. And there will be, right now we're just kind of covering each of these components, but then we'll have a little more interaction. So bear with me as I just continue to talk. So from outputs, we move to outcomes, which are the changes that could result, or that you're hoping to result from your program's activities. And these outcomes fall along a continuum ranging from short-term to medium-term to long-term. Short-term outcomes are often considered changes in knowledge, skills, or attitudes. And those are the things that we would say are generally measured in 1 year. So 1 year program activity. That's what we mean by short-term. And then medium-term would be changes you would expect to see beyond that. It could be changes in behavior, Sometimes that takes a little bit longer to see a change in behavior that results from beneficiaries' new knowledge, skills, or attitudes. And then long-term outcomes are more characterized by changes in condition or status in life that result from beneficiaries' new behaviors or actions. So the long-term outcome generally you won't be required to measure. It's more like, help us see your vision. Like what is that like end goal that you're really hoping to reach for? So what's identified, and it can depend on your program, the length of your program, the expectations, how intensive your intervention is. It could look different from program to program. So again, just think about what makes sense for you and ensure alignment with your theory of change. So there is a hypothetical nutrition assistance program that AmeriCorps uses as an example. In the short term, individuals would be expected to increase their knowledge of healthy food choices. And this change in knowledge is expected to lead to them actually adopting healthy food practices, which would be a behavioral change that represents a medium-term outcome. And then in turn, they would hope that the next step would be that their whole family would increase their household food security, which would be a long-term outcome of the program. So just an example. Okay, so yeah, let's take a moment to really highlight the differences between outputs and outcomes. At first it can seem really obvious, but sometimes it can get gray. And they are often confused with one another. So on the left side of the slide, there are program outputs. These are the direct products of a program's activities or services. The outputs are quantifying the services that were delivered. And program outcomes, on the other hand, quantify the changes a program intends to bring about as a result of the program's activities or interventions. So while outputs are the essential elements that enable change, they aren't representing benefits or changes in and of themselves. I was about to ask if there are any questions, and I see one in the chat. Are outputs always going to be a number of people? Not always, but often it could be the number of people, but also it could be, just depending on how you want to word it, it could be the number of workshops provided, or even if it's more important to you, the number of referrals that you provided, because maybe one person gets more than one referral and you're wanting to demonstrate that. So it could be helpful to see the number of overall referrals and not just people who are receiving referrals. It kind of depends on your program design. And that is certainly something that I could one-on-one help people out with. Robin offered some alternatives in the chat as well. Number of trees planted if you're a conservation environmental program. But we might not know yet if those trees live or die or contribute to environmental change. So that could be another example. So we are of an output, not an outcome. Just the sheer number of trees planted, for example. It is always a number. That's correct. Outcomes, we still would want to, it still will be quantifiable. We'll still want to track the number of people or acres who are demonstrating a change. And yeah, I hope that makes sense. But you'll still have a number amount for the outcome, the number of people, or again, if you're an environmental program, maybe the number of acres or miles of trail that were improved. But it is tracking changes. Great questions.
Yeah, these are really good questions. Lou, would this be a good time to maybe talk about the number in your output? That target number represents the total, whereas the number in your outcome is a portion of that total that received the output, but then showed the change. So if you have 100 folks receiving referrals, maybe only 75 actually go through with that referral and seeking that appointment. Is that helpful at all for folks in chat, or is there more on that later, Lou?
Yeah, I think that's good to mention, and there will be more on that later as well when we go into performance measures. Yep. And so if we don't cover it in enough depth, by the end, let me know and we can dig into that a little more. All right, if there are no more questions at this point, we can continue with the slides. So this is all about reading a logic model. They're typically read left to right and employ an if-then sequence among the key components. There's a generic example on the screen, and it reads, if your program has these inputs or resources, then it can carry out these activities. The if-then words are probably super small on your screen. I apologize for that. So then it continues, if your program carries out these activities, then it can produce these outputs. And if your program has produced these outputs, then it will achieve these outcomes. So basically the logic model has two sides to it. First is the process side, and that's really focused on a program's implementation or the planned work. So all of those inputs, resources, activities, outputs, or direct products, those are considered part of the process. And then there's the outcome side of the logic model that describes the expected sequence of changes that the program is hoping to accomplish. And those are the short-term, medium-term, long-term changes. They reflect what difference the program intends to make. And so when you're creating your logic model, you can go that way, left to right, with the if-then kind of logic, and that works great. Maybe you know exactly what your inputs are, you know your activities, so you can just move from there and pin down more details as you go along. But there's also an option to go the other way. If you know, this is our long-term vision, this is the change we really, really want to see. And so maybe you know your long-term outcome and you want to start there and work backwards. You can definitely do that as you're building out your logic model. So you can start with the long-term outcome and then ask the question, but how? How would we get there? What's the step right before? And you can work your way from right to left. So regardless of which approach you take, you know, it will, either process, the goal is to help you uncover gaps that you might have in the logic or clarify some assumptions you've made and get it really clear and written down and help you better understand how investments and your program's activities are likely to produce the intended results or outcomes that you're going for. All right, so here is a group exercise. This could be a big stretch because we are going to build a logic model in real time. We're mostly making it up. So the practice really is more to ensure alignment between each piece and make sure that it makes sense. But the logic model will be generally based on a wildlife conservation program that's designed to create healthy, productive, and sustainable ecosystems for the benefit of wildlife in areas of need. So that's the main goal, a wildlife conservation program, all about creating healthy ecosystems for the benefit of wildlife. And we are going to work on this together. It's super helpful if you just unmute your mic and jump in. Using the chat also works well. Robin is going to open up a blank logic model for us, and we're going to work on this together as a group. And it is such great practice for when you work on your own logic model after this webinar. Okay, so Robin put a little description in the chat so we can refer to. Thanks, Robin. And Robin is also going to be our typist there as we build it out and capture things that the suggestions people are making. So let's get going. The problem, which is the community problem that the program activities are designed to address. Our problem could be, I see written in there, wildlife is decreasing. So the point, is wildlife conservation. So it seems very likely that there would be some concerns about the health or numbers of the wildlife in the area. Anyone have other?
Can you put up the other slide real quick again? I just want to copy it so I have it for reference.
Sure, I think Robin can do that, but also
This one?
No, the program we're building.
That one?
There you go. Yeah, thanks. Got it. Thank you.
No problem.
and there's some of that wording was pasted in the chat, if that's helpful to reference there.
And this is, in fact, what one of your templates that we will be giving you is this exact template. And so you can see we have some descriptions at the top as reminders about what each of the columns are.
Yeah, so let's move to the inputs column. So these are the resources. What do you think would be some of the resources for delivering this program?
So staff, this is Beth. So the number of people who can help support that. The other question would be, is if this is where this is located, the wildlife conservation, because it depends on if it's within a city, then transportation may or may not be an issue, but resources would be. And then also tools and equipment.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. I would imagine there would need to be certain specific tools and equipment.
Volunteers too.
Volunteers. Since this is an AmeriCorps program, I'd imagine there would be AmeriCorps members, but also, yeah, volunteers. We certainly often see that for our environmental programs. There's a lot of service to be done. Great. I think that we could certainly think of more, but I think that's a solid foundation for the inputs if we want to move to activities. Or Beth, did you have something to add?
No, I was just getting too deep into it. I was like, do we have a partner organization that's like, I don't remember what we are, but maybe there's like an animal rescue or something that we're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. We could add that. Partnerships are super important resources that help us accomplish our outcomes.
I'll try not to go too far down the rabbit hole of an imaginary problem and organization.
I love it. And just let's not forget funding. I think, I'm not sure we ever cover that very well, but this can take me to a new page.
You can keep that in mind. All right. And so activities. What would be, and again, we're making this up. What could be an intervention that an AmeriCorps program would do that would address the
How about
decrease in wildlife?
community education?
Sure. Community education.
To Robin's point, do we need to say anything about fundraising?
Yeah, that's a good question, Lou. Is that, if you don't have it already, is it an input or an activity? That's a gray one. I don't know if we've had that come up before.
Yeah. I mean, we are generally, I think, in this activities column, focusing on the activities that AmeriCorps members and the volunteers they recruit will do. So I know for some programs like Vista, fundraising could be a big part of what they do, but I wouldn't expect that our AmeriCorps members would be doing a lot of fundraising, even though that would be a component of the program overall. I generally don't see it captured in this activities column, specific to like what your AmeriCorps members and volunteers they recruit will be engaged in.
There's a good suggestion in chat that I'd like to unpack a little bit if people want to talk about a system to support creating the change needed.
Building a system.
Is that like a data tracking system or a how to?
I think my thought was basically, if the plan is to increase wildlife and increase the health, like what infrastructure do you have to have that you clearly don't have to make all of the things that you're educating on, or, you know, all the people you're bringing in, like where is that housed?
I like that thought. You're almost doing the reverse way, kind of working back over here, narrowing in on outcomes and coming this direction.
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying, and I'm having a hard time thinking of how to word that in the but I agree, and it makes sense.
What do you see the volunteers and AmeriCorps members doing?
In this instance, I guess, so someone had mentioned community education. So, you know, what is it that who's building the curriculum that they are educating the community on? And, you know, are there other things that have to be, let's say that it's wildlife in a, you know, community with more homes and things like that. Like, is there an infrastructure that has to be created where you're handing out locking garbage cans or something like that? I don't know, my brain can be a little specific.
No, this is great. I think that, well, Lou, I'm sorry, but yes, I think we want to get to some real specific deliverables here, like frequency, intensity, duration, dosage, those. So distribution, I heard distribution of locking garbage cans.
Yeah, like maybe there needs to be a sort of community needs assessment that happens every year just to kind of check in on like where are we at. I'm kind of hearing that in some of what you're saying, Brianne. Or is it Brianna? Brianne?
It's just Brianne.
Brianne. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, kind of making sure that we know like what's happening in the community so we can be sure to address those gaps and stay up to date with how things are evolving and changing. So that could definitely be something that members are doing. They're just kind of tracking that, doing an assessment so that they can target their activities. Great. I think we can move to outputs. That looks like we've got quite a few activities going there. So again, we're using that if then logic. So if we're providing community education, then we would expect what sort of direct products from that.
And these are those outputs Lou was describing. So these are usually
Right.
correspond to data tracking. Yeah, direct numbers.
Right. Yeah. Like either number of individuals who get who attend a workshop, or a community education presentation, however we might do it, or maybe just the number of community education presentations, if that's what we choose to do, workshops or presentations.
Would it probably be number of wildlife? Somehow? If you're, like out there counting, I mean, like that's an outcome for sure. If the problem is wildlife is decreasing, then whatever we're doing should make wildlife increase, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I would see that as something we're aiming for in our outcomes, definitely.
Okay, so maybe not an output then.
Oh,
Yeah,
Lisa,
those outputs.
I'm seeing some things in the chat that I think I'd missed before, but just about oh, maybe you captured that, working with local farmers. So number of farmers who maybe are adopting wildlife friendly practices.
Would adopting be the change? Would we need to educate the farmers first?
Right. Yeah, I think that would be, for our outputs, we would count the number of farmers who do receive some education, and then we would expect to see a certain percentage of them who are actually adopting some new wildlife friendly practices. So that's great. We can capture that in both the outputs and the outcomes.
There was
Thanks,
some,
Robin. Yeah, I like that.
yeah,
So
there was some
first they're
chat
having a
about,
knowledge gain and then they're changing behavior.
yeah, there was some talk and chat about root cause, and I think that's a really great point. You do have to know your root cause. We're being overly general here with just decreasing an unhealthy wildlife, but for you all, you're going to target that root cause in your theory of change, and that's how you then, I think, build. In my experience, logic models can be a lot simpler than we want to make them. So if our main goal is working with local farmers, you can see that we go very simplistic. First, we need to know the number of farmers we're educating. Then we need to know through some type of survey or test that the farmers actually understand what we trained to. And then maybe we ask farmers, how are you adopting? Who's actually doing that? Which maybe then leads to a wildlife increase or healthier wildlife. Is that making sense to folks?
Yes, it is. I think, Robin, to your point, one of the things is that I was just, and I'm sorry, this is Beth, I just put it in a private chat, but I think it's kind of, this tool is a great tool. It's just hard when this isn't our specialty. So maybe, yeah, anyway, my suggestion was maybe just using something that would be more like something that would be more along the lines of what we do every day, and something that's more practical to what our work is. So not kind of guessing.
No, that's helpful feedback. Yeah, last year our cohort was 50% conservation. So maybe we can mix it up a little bit depending. All of you are going to be doing really unique things.
I just wonder because in some of the previous slides, the outcomes weren't always a number. And so I guess I'm wondering about the wording of the outcomes, especially like number of farmers who report knowledge gain. I wonder if I feel like, well, like if Girl Scouts, like I think output, yeah, it could be 100 farmers educated, but I mean, instead of who report knowledge gain, we'd probably want to be like who demonstrate knowledge gain, or like it would just be like X, maybe even X, I don't know, like a number somehow of farmers who demonstrate knowledge gain. And then I guess somewhere else in this fake proposal, we'd say what we actually asked them, right? Or I don't know, maybe we're like driving around from farm to farm and we can see that they've adopted new practices to make the wildlife healthier. Right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, you know, if this is the route that we're going, we could further add some detail to that problem. Maybe wildlife is decreasing. And one of the big reasons we've found out is because of farmers, certain farming practices that are going on. And we have identified that this is a big part of our program, is educating farmers. So we certainly could add more detail to that root cause and really hone in on that piece, which it looks like we're just kind of naturally doing as an experiment.
How are you doing on time, Lou? Do you want to move on from this exercise?
I think we could. But so now everyone has gotten a chance to see sort of how we're moving from column to column and using that if then logic. So you would do the same with, say, distribution of locking garbage cans. Like if we're going to do that, then what sort of output would we expect? What sort of, and then outcome, and move on from there. So we would make sure that each of those activities, we have an aligned component in the columns that follow. Any other questions that people have? But it seems like this is making sense to people.
Lou, would you use percentage instead of a specific number for short-term outcomes or midterm?
You could, if you don't know. We'll get into that more with performance measures. With performance measures, we definitely want a specific number that you can track and is your target. But for some of the other, especially like midterm or long-term, you might have percentages, and that would be okay. So in the logic model specifically. So we'll delineate that from the performance measures, and the performance measures, we definitely want to see actual numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, good question. And Robin added some info in the chat. All right. Well, yeah, Robin, let's go ahead and switch back to the PowerPoint. You've got it going. Thank you. I will pull my notes back up. And so we've had this practice. So after this, part of your homework will be developing a logic model specific to your program and that you can use in your daily program operations. So this exercise really is about thinking through the logic of your program or intervention. And you would include all of your program's expected outcomes, even if you don't plan to measure or collect on every single one of them. That's okay. We're still wanting to see just the logic and what your expected outcomes are, even if you don't track all of it. That's okay. We still want you to lay that out in your logic model. And there are some questions on this slide to help you think through the modeling process for each component. And you'll recognize that similar questions are on that template itself. So you'll get a copy of that template, and it has those guiding questions to help you to fill in each column. And you will submit that. I think at the end, there's more information on the requested deadline. So as you're finalizing your logic model, it's important to verify or assess whether the model you've created reflects an appropriate level of detail. You're also going to want to make sure that it's plausible, that it's realistic, and it's really helpful to get a lot of feedback from others, other stakeholders, other staff, that the model really accurately represents your program. So there are some questions here as well that helps you determine that. If you're including all of the key program components or leaving something out, are there any gaps? And is it reasonable to assume that your program can achieve the expected outcomes? Those are all great questions to ask yourselves and ask others who you engage to assist. So some things to remember, generally, you don't develop a logic model all at once, in just a few minutes, one time, and then it's done. It really is an iterative process. And there's different ways that it can look. It is likely to evolve. And we want to underscore that logic models reflect planned activities and outcomes. It should be supported by an underlying theory of change. In practice, programs may not only operate quite differently, but also produce unintended results. And so that's when we would want to like revisit your logic model and maybe make some changes, or in the future, maybe an evaluation would help you identify, is your program operating as written or as you proposed or not. The logic model really is dynamic. It can and should be changed and refined as your program grows and develops. And it will play a critical role in informing your future evaluations and building the evidence base for your program. And again, we'll talk more about those pieces later. So we have, it is very close to 11. I think we could take a break now, would be a good time before we move into the performance measurement piece. What do you think, Robin? 11:05, give people close to 10 minutes, a little more than 5 minutes.
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, people can, we don't have anything planned, no stretching. You can kind of take care of yourself, run to the restroom, grab something to drink, and we will be back at 11:05. We are ready to get going again and move to our next section, which is all about high quality performance measures. The recording has resumed. All right. Yep, let's get going. So this module focuses on the core concepts and principles that AmeriCorps uses to ensure programs have high quality performance measures. You are able to choose between either developing your own performance measures, or you can select national performance measures. Either way, you want to identify appropriate performance measures so you can report your accomplishments with confidence and demonstrate how your program is meeting the community need that you set out to address. When implemented correctly, performance measurement is a tool that you can use both to manage your program and to tell your program story. So we're going to talk about, really focus on basic performance measurement concepts. And actually today, rather than looking at how performance measurement is different from evaluation, we'll focus a little more on data collection for performance measures. And a large focus, as always, we keep saying this word, alignment, including the last webinar about theory of change. A really big focus is on alignment among all the various parts. So we'll go through some key considerations to ensure the outcome you plan to measure is high quality. So specifically, we're looking to ensure that it's meaningful, realistic, and accurate. So where do performance measures come from? They come from your logic model. And so here is an example. We just got finished talking about logic models. So your performance measures, typically we're looking for one aligned measure. That means one output and one corresponding outcome, typically a short-term outcome. So most programs have a primary intervention, and that's the one we encourage you to choose for your performance measure. So if there's any intervention that the majority of your members are focused on, or like most of their time is allocated towards, that's the activity that we would expect you to choose for your performance measures. And so in this example, we have members who are conducting habitat development projects. And so that their performance measure, their output measure would be that they planted native trees and other native species on X number of sites. And then their outcome would be about increasing the available shelter for native wildlife. All right, so hopefully that gives a little context for performance measures and how it relates to what we've already covered. So we're going to get into performance measurement itself in a little more detail. It's really a systematic process of tracking your program or project's outputs and outcomes. And remember, outputs are the amount of service provided. They measure the completion of activities and document the fact that individuals receive services, or that products were created or programs were developed. They answer the question, how much service did we perform, or what products did we develop? And they do not answer the question about what changed as a result of a service provided or product developed. That is more about your outcomes. So as we'll see, outcomes are really about the changes or the benefits that are occurring. They can reflect changes in individuals, organizations, communities, or even the environment. As we've been having a lot of environmental examples, and they can include changes in attitudes, knowledge, behavior, or even condition. Changes, for example, within an organization might include an enhanced system to better serve community members. So the outcomes are answering questions like, what difference did our service make for our beneficiaries? So let's talk a little bit about those types of outcomes that we might see, which include changes in attitude or belief, knowledge or skill, behavior or condition. And we're going to have a little exercise after this. So just a heads up that after this slide, there's some kind of putting this knowledge into practice. So first, you could have outcomes that are about attitudes or beliefs, and those involve a change in a thought or feeling. An example could be a caregiver believes that they have more social support now that they are receiving respite services. You could have an outcome that measures knowledge or skill, and that involves a change in understanding or ability, what a person's learning. So an example of that could be a student who's improving their reading ability after attending tutoring. So their skill has increased. There are outcomes that address behavior, which involve changes in actions such as conducts or habits, often in a specific context. And an example of that could be maybe you see a student who is improving their class participation according to teachers after they've gone through your mentoring program. And then finally, there are outcomes regarding condition that involve a change in situation or circumstance. So an example of that could be a family is transitioned into safe, affordable housing after receiving referrals and counseling. Or another example could be a community receives a new after-school program because a youth organization has been able to build its capacity to provide services. So let's explore examples of outcomes in certain focus areas. So where would each of these fall? There's a bulleted list. So again, feel free to unmute yourself and jump in, or type in the chat. So the first bullet is increased school attendance. Do you believe that that would fall under attitude, belief, knowledge or skill, a behavior, or condition? Any ideas? Where would increased school attendance most likely fall? Behavior. All right. Great. On the next slide shows the answers. So let's keep going. How about increased interest in school? Where would you put that? Attitude. Seeing a couple attitudes. Great. How about successful completion of high school? Which column would that fit into? Condition. Excellent. And last, improved math ability. Knowledge, skill, perfect. Good job, y'all. I'm pretty sure all of those are right. We can verify on the next slide. Yep, there we go. You got it. Well done. We can move to the next slide. So here I encourage you to really zero in on the intended outcome and make sure that whatever you choose, that it's meaningful in some way, that it's ambitious, but also realistic. Remember, you have 1 year to measure this. So you want something that you would expect to see change in just a year or less, but it should still be meaningful. And make sure that it clearly articulates the type of change that you hope to see. Is it a change in attitude or skill or behavior? So at first, trying to ascertain how meaningful an outcome is might seem like a really subjective exercise, but let's consider some criteria. For an outcome to be meaningful, you would consider, is the outcome a compelling change in the lives of beneficiaries? And is the outcome getting at the key change that you want to occur? So again, we would relate this back to your theory of change and think about the community problem that you've described. It's really common for projects to want to know it all and have a really long list of very interesting outcome measurement questions that you want to pursue. And that's fine. However, the selected performance measure outcome should only respond directly to the identified problem or need, and do so in a substantial, meaningful way. It shouldn't be peripheral or kind of indirectly related to your theory of change, but really directly related. Other criteria to include, you could think about the beneficiaries that you're serving. Is your target audience receiving the service identified in the outcome? There might be multiple groups that benefit from service, including your AmeriCorps members, but make sure that the outcome focuses on the target population that you've identified in your need. So for example, if a job skills program where national service participants serve, maybe the program works with all unemployed community members, but the target population identified in the need is unemployed veterans, then your outcome really should focus on the veterans. And then there's the scope of the outcome. How many people will benefit? Consider the number of people you believe will achieve the outcome. Given the need in your community and the context, will a sufficient number of beneficiaries experience the intended change? And there's the magnitude of the outcome. How much change can you expect among those who receive services? not only are you looking for a change, but you also want to consider the level of change. Is the outcome target you identified worth the effort? Are your national service participants spending a great deal of time and effort working for this change? Or maybe they're doing something else that's really important and their energy is focused there. If so, you might want to reconsider. And then there's evidence. Does the evidence for the interventions support your choice of outcome? And so remember this from the theory of change and go back and do a refresh if that's helpful. Your choice of intervention should be supported by evidence. If you're able to find it, it should be supported by evidence that shows a cause and effect relationship between the intervention and the intended outcome. Next, is it ambitious but realistic? Consider if your selected outcome is too modest. The outcome should be ambitious enough to really chip away at the problem you identified. It should produce a discernible improvement in that problem or condition that gave rise to the intervention. But also, you should be careful not to choose an outcome because maybe it's really easy to measure. Because if it's easy to measure but doesn't really reflect an important change that your program seeks, then it might not be the one that you're wanting to go with. That can be a really common program misstep, is focusing on an outcome that appears more convenient, maybe like you're just easily able to access the data, but maybe it's not so compelling, or maybe it's not as directly related to the problem that you've chosen to focus on. On the flip side, you don't want the outcome to be unrealistic or unachievable either. It's possible to aim too low, but you can also aim too high. Consider your program time frame. Again, your outcome, your performance measurement outcome needs to be measurable within your program year. So keep in mind the severity of the problem you're addressing. For instance, if students, if you are wanting to increase the number of students with a GPA of 3.9 or higher, that could be overly ambitious if your target population are students who are at risk of dropping out of school. That might not be very feasible within one program year. And also take into account the resources that you have available. Your outcomes and how ambitious they are, they do need to be balanced with staff time, AmeriCorps member time, and the expertise needed to achieve these outcomes. Program resources aren't just about the capacity to measure, they're also about capacity to produce certain kinds of outcomes. The design and dosage of the intervention. For example, a program in which mentors engage with their assigned student once a month for 2 hours for 6 months wouldn't expect to see the same outcome as a program that has mentors spending 3 hours a week with their mentees for a whole year. You wouldn't expect their outcomes to be the same. The outcome measure really needs to be aligned with the type of outcome you're measuring. So like we talked about and just kind of had that example that everybody did so great with, attitude, skill, behavior, or condition. Ask yourself, is it the same attitude, skill, behavior, or condition that you identified in your theory of change? For instance, a project that works on educating the public about the regional flora and fauna of the county park should revisit their theory of change if the outcome is increased environmental activism, because the intervention is more addressing knowledge gain, but the outcome, it sounds like the program is wanting to see some behavior change. Before you consider instruments, the outcome needs to accurately and clearly embody the type of outcome information you're seeking. For example, an early childhood education project that helps children with kindergarten. If the project's outcome is that children will improve their pre-math readiness, this is a knowledge and skill outcome. If, however, at the planning meeting, program staff discover that the data they've been collecting are about how much the kids like the pre-math activities, and if they think the pre-math concepts are fun, then those are attitudes. And in that case, the project has drifted from looking at knowledge or skill outcomes to a focus on attitudes, which wasn't their central focus. Make sure that you are clearly identifying the outcome type, and that will help you catch those kinds of errors in your instruments and your data collection approach. And here we'll talk a little bit about alignment of outputs and outcomes. So we talked about an aligned set of performance measures. And when we say that, we're referring to that link between the output and the outcome, where the outcome results from the output. And this came up a little bit earlier when we were talking also about targets. So alignment also means that the output you're measuring is produced by the intervention. So for example, if the intervention is about an AmeriCorps program building trails, then the output would track the miles of trails that are built. And an aligned output and outcome measure the same intervention and the same beneficiaries. By measuring outputs along with outcome, programs have the context for reporting, and they'll know their level of success. So of those served, how many change? For instance, the output, an example that's shown on the slide is 100. So if 100 children complete the early education program, a possible outcome would be expecting to see that 75 of those 100 children would actually improve their numeracy skills. We wouldn't expect for every single person who receives a service to demonstrate a change. So we do expect to see the outcome number, target number, be less than your output target number. So we have a couple examples, and you all are going to have a look and see if you believe the output and outcome are aligned or not. So the activity is up on the screen. This is a housing services example. A study identified inaccessible and unsafe housing as a major problem among people with disabilities in the community. So in response, a national service project organized a housing repair intervention modeled after effective housing programs in other counties. The project takes requests from individuals with disabilities living in unsafe or inaccessible housing. With the help of community volunteers, the project then plans and completes construction work on those homes. So the output tracks the number of economically disadvantaged individuals with disabilities that receive necessary upgrades and repairs to their homes. And the outcome they have chosen tracks the number of volunteers on the construction team that improve their construction skills. So first, we're going to look at do the intervention and the output align. So that is the output likely to result from the intervention? So we're just going to look at that very first part, alignment between the intervention and output. Beth, I see your answer about the output and the outcome, and you are correct. The output and the outcome do not align. They're not measuring the same. And the intervention and the output do align though. So let's kind of move to the next slide, Robin. So yes, it is logical to assume that participation in a well-designed and well-implemented project offering housing construction service will lead to the completion of housing upgrades and repairs for the individuals with disabilities. So that is logical, that is aligned. However, if we go to the next one and we're looking at the alignment between the output and the outcome, then we can move to the next slide again. We see that they are not aligned. The output here is tracking the number of beneficiaries receiving housing services, while the outcome is measuring people who perform the service. So these are two different groups are being measured, so they're not aligned. The focus of the output and the outcome should be on the group of clients who receive the housing services. So well done. Thank you. So let's talk for a moment about the benefits of having performance measures. And is this our first cute animal picture? No, we had a raccoon earlier. They're purely for your enjoyment. So first, if you plan to recruit and select sites, performance measurement can help you not only define your expectations for sites, but also give you another way to assess which sites might be a good fit for you and which sites will best be able to implement the selected intervention and use your program resources wisely. Another reason to track performance measures is that the data feeds into reports that you do for Serve Washington that we then send up to AmeriCorps. You might have other stakeholders, and you can use those results to promote your program or project and maintain or strengthen buy-in from various stakeholders and to make the case for continued support or new resources. Now we can move into the topic of data collection. I'm trying to remember. I hope I have a note about when we have a couple documents that could be helpful to go over. But maybe we will show some of those just at the end. So once you identify what you intend to measure, it's time to consider, where are you going to get your data? How are you going to collect that? To identify data sources, you could start by identifying a list of as many possible data sources to answer your measurement question as you can think of. And then identify your preferred data source. Ideally, those who are actually experiencing or witnessing the change. And consider how you might gain access to this data source. If it's not accessible, consider others that you have on your list. And it's often helpful to think through several data sources, including the preferred one, along with pros and cons of each data source. To some extent, your choice will depend on the type of change you want to see. In the case of attitudes or knowledge, it's best to get the data directly from those experiencing the change. Questions about attitudes provide subjective data about how people feel about something. Knowledge is a bit more objective, and a person either knows something or not. They could take a quiz and you can check. In the case of behavior or conditions, the data can come from those experiencing the change from other observers, or sometimes from secondary sources like knowledge, behavior and conditions, are objective forms of information. The behavior or conditions exist independent of how a person believes or how they feel. And these are generally accessible to external observers. Once you decide on a data source and method, the next step is to find or develop an instrument for measuring. There's so many ways to find instruments, including just internet searches. If you've been working in a particular field for a while, you may already have something in place or know about your field's best measurement practices. You could talk to colleagues, look at recent relevant research to get ideas about appropriate measurement approaches, look at the evidence for your intervention. How has the outcome been measured before? Ask others in your professional network what they're using, especially if you're seeking instruments in an unfamiliar service arena. The best ways to measure an outcome are often really specific to a particular focus area or intervention. And we do have an instrument PDF. Robin's got it ready to go. Thank you. I really like this resource developed many years ago by AmeriCorps and will be provided to you. And Robin's going to scroll through just so you can see 2003. Wow, it is old. I still think it's super helpful to help you develop an instrument that's going to make sense for what you're wanting to measure. You could keep scrolling down a little bit so people can see. Yeah, here are some things to ask yourself if you're, depending on what you're looking to measure. Are you assessing attitudes or opinions? And then in the right column, they're suggesting a method to use to measure that. So again, it's a 19-page document, but I think you can quickly skim it. You can, are you wanting to measure knowledge, behavior? They describe direct measures of that, maybe some other options that are less direct. But again, it's a really handy reference. I just wanted to show that off a little bit and encourage you, if you're kind of starting from scratch, it can be a really helpful tool. And in the past, I had more slides in this presentation about survey questions specifically, but I don't think we need to go into that much detail. Just know that I'm always happy to review any instruments that you develop. Survey questions, if you just need another set of eyes, I am more than happy to look over that and provide feedback at any point in time. So you want to ensure that when you're selecting an outcome instrument, that it's age appropriate, at the right education level for your participants. I've seen examples of a program that had kindergarten through second graders engaged in science learning and activities, and they had this detailed written pre-post survey, even though they used smiley faces or frowny faces that students could select. A lot of the kindergartners couldn't read the questions, and many students were English language learners, but the survey was only offered in English. So there's all kinds of things that could come up that you need to consider when you're creating an instrument. All right, we are wrapping up my portion, and then I will hand it over to Robin, but just a summary here about Performance measurement is a systematic process of measuring progress through outputs and outcomes. And I think we have reiterated so many times what an output is and an outcome being about change. So you will be, in your homework, you'll be applying all this knowledge. And your performance measures isn't seeking to prove a causal relationship, but it's offering a snapshot of progress and showing that a change did happen, the change that you were hoping to see. And impact evaluation and other kinds of evaluation are different from performance measures, and we will be talking about those differences, I believe, in webinar 10. So many months down the road, we'll circle back and talk more about performance measures and logic models and how evaluation fits in. So the last foundational element to be aware of is the idea of a learning organization. I do believe, and Robin, can you confirm that people will be working on a data collection plan? Yes, okay. So all of these pieces, working on a data collection plan, having draft performance measures, a logic model, these are all elements to building your organization as a learning organization, which is one who creates, acquires, and transfers knowledge, modifies their behavior to reflect new insights. So that our hope is that all of you will become, if you're not already, and many of you likely are, learning organizations that are using data, making adjustments based on that data to strengthen your program. So our hope here is that by getting really strong logic model and performance measures in place, you will enhance your capacity to make data-driven decisions with the goal of improving your services. All right, and now there are some of the milestones by the end of your first grant cycle. This is what we would hope to see, that you've refined your program and ensured it's being implemented as proposed. You've been building, testing, and refining data collection systems. By the end of that year, or into that first grant cycle, you've been collecting high quality performance measurement data, and you're using that data for program improvement. Your staff capacity is really getting honed, and people are clear on their responsibilities for data tasks. And then you'll be preparing for your first evaluation plan. So that would be at the end of your first 3-year grant cycle. So a number of years down the road. And you are well along in your process of becoming a learning organization. And now I will pass it over to Robin to talk about homework.
Yay, thank you so much, Lou. A lot of good information once again. And even though Lou won't be back as a presenter, Lou will continue to work with each and every one of you throughout this homework period, probably throughout the life cycle of the planning grant, and definitely brings so much added value to our operational grantees in those first 3 years. Lou, we really appreciate you. Thank you for joining us today, and stick around if you can in case we have questions. I want to get through the next couple of slides and then we'll end the recording and hang around for a Q&A period. So homework, once again, just a little note on what really homework is. It's directly related to that curriculum page that you have. If you like to check things off to make yourself feel better, your curriculum has some little check boxes and should always reflect what we're asking of you on these webinars. So the start of your homework was just really about learning about AmeriCorps guidance in general, right? And we're going to cover all of those guidance documents throughout the year. And then you're looking at your theory of change, which is the overall framework, this really large vision that you have for your program. And within that theory of change, you're going to start now making a snapshot of a logic model. And within that logic model, maybe looking at one aligned performance measure. So picking one output and one outcome, excuse me, and how you're going to collect data for that measure. So you're going to get a lot of templates and information from us, including this presentation. And maybe since we do have a couple minutes, I might just bring up to show you. But let me identify the actual deliverables. So a theory of change, a chart format of your theory of change, which we consider more of a logic model, that quick snapshot, just that one set of aligned performance measures and output and outcome, and a data collection plan. So those are the things that we want you working on right now. And as you complete them, or as you want feedback, you can submit them anytime to Lou and Jenny throughout September and October. We know you'll continue working on them past that. That's just a goal for us all, so that we can dedicate some staff capacity in both your organization and our organization to get some initial feedback out. But again, these are kind of rough deadlines, and we will work with you throughout this process. So let's show you some templates that we have. And I really feel like, you know, adult learning varies from person to person and organization to organization, team to team. So while we provide you a lot of templates and tools, if you have a better way of doing something, or if your organization already has a logic model that you're going to, you know, specifically take out pieces for your AmeriCorps program, we are not opposed to you presenting your materials in a way that makes sense for you. Now, having said that, if you don't like that idea of being that creative, we can guide you. So you saw, I think, the logic model template. This is literally what you're going to send out, and you're going to, you know, just poke some pieces of your theory of change in here, just a real short summary. And then maybe just looking at the exercise we did together, if you were going to hone in on this farmer education, this one output, and maybe in that year's time of holding classes and educating those 100 farmers, maybe you were also going to do some type of knowledge gain exercise with them. Maybe this is your performance measure. And so maybe you take these two pieces from your logic model. Look at me trying to type and do things at the same time. And maybe you take these and you put them into your performance measure template, which helps you dive a little deeper into what is necessary to reach those targets. How are you going to set that target? How are you going to measure it? What instrument are you going to use? So this is your performance measure template. And then when thinking about data collection, again, just this is very empty. This is all for you to do a dump of your brain around your collective thought processes. But you could use this to just reflect back to us a little bit. And these are not large exercises. We don't expect books. We're just looking to see that you're mindful of the exercise and you're working your way through it. And then these are the type of things that Lou and Jenny can provide feedback on. And of course, we will include this PDF. And Lou, do you want me to include the samples? So sometimes folks need to see things to understand them. So we have a client tracking sheet. And we have kind of a year-end results tracking sheet. I don't know, Lou, did you want to speak to either of these?
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was wondering where in my slides I had a note to pull them up, and I didn't ever see that. I think you know our planning grantees better than I do. And kind of where they're each at. It could be helpful just to have available for people to look at if they're interested, but it might not apply to everyone.
Sure.
And yeah, I'm seeing someone in the chat saying that would be helpful for them. So yeah, we can certainly just make it available.
Yeah, we'll post
Just-
them.
Yeah, as an example.
I think back in the day too, I will just say like the number of organizations that have gone through modernization practices in the last 5 to 10 years is quite large. And back in the day when AmeriCorps programs were being developed, they had to make all of their own tools. There wasn't a lot of collective databases. There wasn't a lot of data sharing agreements out there. People didn't always have access to either like health records or student data from schools. So it does really vary on how sophisticated your data needs to be or you want it to be and what type of partnerships you have. The things we share with you are things that are made from scratch. Like literally, if you had to do all of the data tracking yourself and can't get it from a database or can't get it from some other tool. So just know that these samples are, I think, a little old school maybe, and maybe a little outdated, but there could still be very small nonprofits or small programs that have to do this self-creation. Is that fair, Lou?
Yes, I think so.
So we will post all of these lovely things that probably feel overwhelming right now. But once you start digging in, will become less overwhelming, especially throughout the year. So we want to thank Lou once again and thank you all for being here. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording and then we'll open it up to talk. Thank you, Lou.
Thank you. Happy to be here.